Now we'll move on to 8.02, first reading of cell phone policy. Ms. Minson, straight to you, or, okay, yep, Mr. Minson.
Good evening. We have one policy for first reading this evening. It's policy JTEC, student use of personal electronic devices. This policy is quite similar to what the board looked at but did not have first reading or approved first reading of at the August 13th school board meeting, and then also discussed at the August work session. So as we typically do, changes from the last time the policy was presented are reflected in red line, additions or strike-throughs, and additions are reflected in red font. And many thanks to Ms. Murphy and Ms. Henderson for their work on looking at the policy, taking the input the board had received, and proposing changes for presentation of this policy for first reading. So just calling out, the additions would be at line 5. There had been two options previously presented to the board, or that the board had discussed at the August meeting and work session. So the board is going with option 2 and deleting option 1, adding that the devices are not allowed at the preschool through 8th grade during the school day, and clarifying that instructional time at the high school at lines 30 to 32 is during classes and assemblies, adding some clarification at line 48 that school-sponsored off-campus activities will be included in the parameters of regulation, and also adding at line 60 and 61 that the board will review the policy annually to make sure that it fits the needs of teachers, staff, and students. Happy to answer any questions the board may have, or to defer to you all to discussions of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minson. I will open the floor to questions, comments. We haven't visited this topic since a number of months ago. We've had a number of town halls with students, with staff, with community members. So this is our revisiting in January, like we committed. So let's pick it back up. Ms. Silverman, you want to start it off?
Thank you, Chair. I know that you have defined instructional time to include classes and assemblies. To me, classes is still vague. Does that include stable group? Does that include Mustang Block? Or is that all other classes, but not those two? Classes just seems still too ambiguous to me, undefined.
Can you suggest a way to clarify that? Mustang Block is an advisory period. Lunch is lunch. Passing period's not instructional time. Would you like us to clarify that somehow in there?
Well, is Mustang Block a class? Is stable group a class?
They're not classes. They are advisory periods where students get advisement. Sometimes they'll do enrichment kinds of activities. Sometimes they'll get intervention activities. Sometimes they'll get SEL or social emotional learning activities. But they are not assigned classes like English, social studies, science, math, language, band. They're assigned on their cards, their schedule cards, but it's not assigned like an academic class. There's not a grade associated with it.
So are students required to be at stable group if they're assigned to stable group?
Yes.
Okay, and is there a teacher in there?
Yes.
So
There's no new material. I think Ms. Rice wanted to maybe give some information too.
I was just going to say, Mustang Block, students are like roaming the school, and there's no one that they have to meet with. They can meet with teachers if they want to, but that's definitely like a free period where students can like work on homework or do things that they find like fun or relaxing. But then stable group is definitely, so on Mondays we have it for an hour, and that's definitely, it's not an instructional period, but there is content that your stable group teacher will go over with you about maybe what's happening in the school that week, or some values that the school wants to stress for like that time of the year. So in my opinion, I think it would make sense for phones to be away during stable group, because that is in a classroom and there are already like phone lockers in there. So that just makes sense, and I think that's what a lot of stable groups have been doing. But then Mustang Block, because students can go anywhere they want, I wouldn't like call that a class period.
So I agree with you. Would completely ignoring the teacher and talking to your friends be acceptable in stable group? I'm going to guess not. I'm guessing there has to be attention given to the teacher who's in the room. And so if you're not allowed to just completely ignore the teacher and talk to your friends and do whatever you want, and you have to be listening, then to me, that means phones shouldn't be present during that time.
Thank you, Ms. Silverman. Other questions or reactions to that, or other thoughts in general? Mr. Anderson?
So I'm probably the lone voice on this, but I will reiterate my kind of position that I think we should ban bell-to-bell. I do think that a lot of the discussion that we've had on phone usage in schools has focused more on the high performers and what they can do productively with their phones, and not enough on the students who have trouble with having phones. And I've talked to several parents, several students. Phones are still being used in classrooms. Students are still texting their parents to see if they can get more time on Instagram during class. I'm not quite sure if the door pockets, while they've probably mitigated some of the kind of behaviors that we don't want to see in classrooms, I don't think that they've kind of led necessarily to what I think is an optimal way of being in instructional time. And so I don't think that we should be allowing phones in schools. I don't think that anyone's made the case that they've made schools better. And I don't think if you can't make the case that phones have made schools better, I'm not quite sure we should be allowing phones in schools. But I'm probably the lone voice on that, so that's totally fine. That being said, I think having Stable Group as a phone-free space would make sense. There's a purpose for it. If the purpose is not to be on the phone, then you shouldn't have phones available to you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Ms. Silverman?
I just wanted to say you're not the lone voice. I 100% concur.
Ms. Henderson?
So I want to thank all the members of the public who participated in the various focus groups, the ones we held at the schools, the ones we held with parents, the one we held with students, all of the feedback. One of the students in their comments on their written feedback wrote, "No one's going to read this." I read it. I saw it. Read every word that y'all submitted, and I really, really appreciate that. One of the things that I learned is that there are academic and educational reasons that some students in the high school use their phones for. And so I think that is important as we move into this new world to be mindful and aware of. While I generally agree with my colleagues that I would generally prefer not to see phones in schools, I do think that that is a reality that is happening in our school, that there is educational purposes for which phones are used. My personal interpretation of the current draft is that it allows the superintendent room to define instructional time at the high school. So defining it as including classes and assemblies is not exclusive of the superintendent saying Stable Group is instructional time in the regulations, or Mustang Block is instructional time, or if those might change in the future years, whatever we call them and how we use them. So I'm comfortable with it written as is. The other piece about the current draft is it requires us as a board to revisit it every year. So if we look at it after a year and go, this is not working and they need to be out, we have built that in, that kind of accountability mechanism for us to evaluate it each time. I think it will be absolutely critical if we do pass a policy as currently drafted or similar to currently drafted that is not bell to bell, that the enforcement be rigorous and age appropriate, because the policy is irrelevant if the enforcement is not there. And so that I look to the superintendent, really our future superintendent for next year, and the leadership team of the schools to make sure that they are implementing the policy with fidelity, with the focus on the educational outcomes, which is the purpose of it.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Not to jump to Dr. Wright, but I know, Dr. Wright, last time we talked, you mentioned that you were going to connect with some of the schools and some of the principals around they're trying out different programs and things like that. Anything came back that you want to share with us as you were going through this process?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gould, and good evening to the board. So I think that as we were reaching out to some of the schools and divisions that were trying different approaches, whether it's whether it's the phone pockets on doors or yonder pouches. I think a lot of it was, they're still trying to understand that impact that they're seeing. We had a site visit at one of the schools that was impacted by the snow, so we'll try and revisit that to actually be able to go see some of that in person. But I think, what we're hearing is some of the similar challenges that we're talking about that Ms. Henderson just referred to. The enforcement and having a clear and consistent policy is going to be one of the things that is going to allow us to be successful. And that, as they were going through that process, that idea that you have written into the draft language of having an annual review process to make sure it's meeting the needs of the staff is going to be something that's really critical.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. I know, Dr. Wright, you and I also attended a session at VSBA where a district, I can't remember which county it was, implemented bell-to-bell, the yonder pouches in their path. They've been doing that for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's correct. That was Hopewell City Schools, which is a very small division right outside of the Richmond area. And they had started with yonder pouches, 100% of the students, bell-to-bell. I believe this is year 3 or year 4 of them. And so as they were talking about that, one of the things, one of my takeaways from that session was the iteration that they had to do throughout. And also that even with the yonder pouches, they were still finding that there were still ways of students to get around some of them. So I think having to constantly review it was something that was important for them. And I imagine it will be for us as well.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. And I noticed also the 2 local school districts, Alexandria City and Arlington, recently passed district-wide bell-to-bell. I imagine that would be for the fall of this year. It might be. Is that when it's, do you know if that's, I think Arlington just passed it last week or the week before. I think Alexandria City passed it recently as well, but it might be something also that, especially to Ms. Henderson's point and revisiting this every year, we might want to just continue to keep that outreach going to figure out how it's going with those, I think those whole districts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm familiar with both of those policies that were adopted. I do not know the actual implementation dates, but we can definitely work with the leaders in those divisions to kind of be thought partners in this process and kind of see how it's working for them and be able to report back during those annual check-ins.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's what I struggle with this is, I think that when we talked about this in August or September, I can't remember the date, there was a concern about if we do a bell-to-bell that we're not listening to what teachers are asking for. And we all tried to backtrack from that. We tried to clarify that, obviously, in our subsequent meetings. I think some of the districts that I've seen implement bell-to-bell, some of the feedback that I've read is the teachers have appreciated it because they don't have to deal with this anymore. They don't have to deal with the pouches. They don't have to try to worry about police, and it takes it away from them. And that's something I just think I'm curious about as we continue to explore, as to Ms. Murphy's idea about making sure we revisit this every year. If this is becoming a distraction. Ms. Rice, do you have any thoughts? I know you've had conversations with your, your classmates and your own experiences, but any reflections that you've had from our initial discussion when that whole table was filled with lots of voices? And yeah.
I would say I think that phone use has definitely decreased significantly by probably 95%. And then in some classes, if we finish early, the teacher just doesn't really feel like dealing with, oh, you can't go get your phone, you can't go get your phone. So if she's done teaching, then she's like, okay, you guys can get your phones. And then maybe we'll have our phones for that period, because I think some of the teachers just don't want to deal with keeping them away from us. But in other cases, I've never seen an issue where, at least in the classes that I'm in, the teacher is consistently telling someone to get off their phone because the phones are in the pouches, compared to last year and the years before, where the teachers would be telling the same kids over and over again to put their phones away. So in that way, I think it has been helpful.
All right. Thanks, Ms. Rice. Do you have any questions for us or any thoughts about this? I mean, I know this will affect your future, classmates as you jet off to UVA, as Ms. Tice just alerted us. So yes, we don't know what their cell phone policy is there, but congratulations on.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hey,
So-
Chair Gould, can
Yes,
I?
Dr. Noonan.
I have a meeting tomorrow with my regional colleagues, and I wanted to clarify that Arlington policy is that they do allow students in high school to use their phones during non-instructional time.
And that was a policy the school board passed last week?
Yeah.
That it's not, it's not,
It says they need to power them down through the day and store their device during class time, but they are allowed to use them during non-instructional periods such as lunch.
okay. All right, thanks for the
And I'll check
clarification.
in with my colleague from Alexandria tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Noonan. Other thoughts or reflections? Ms. Sherwood? Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I have appreciated listening to everybody's comments. I've appreciated, in particular, having the opportunity to go to the town halls and learn from all the students and all of the teachers and all the other community members. And I think I just really felt that what Ms. Henderson said was really well said. For me, hearing the specific sort of academic and instructional uses was very useful, and understanding that the teachers are thus far happy with the policy as it is this year. Those are the two sort of most influential factors for me currently, but I think it's especially important, as several voices have already said, to have this annual review, and I think that's going to be really useful next year, so thank you.
Ms. Sherwood, can you also talk about the complexity? I think you and I were talking before the meeting started about the senior, yeah, that was a good point as well.
Yeah, I think what you and I had discussed, and I've sort of discussed with others, is there's such developmental differences between our freshmen and our seniors, and in a really perfect world for me, I would love to see some ability to have further restrictions, perhaps for thinking off the cuff for freshmen and sophomores versus juniors and seniors. But talking through that with you all individually and with some other members of our community, it's that from an implementation perspective, that just doesn't seem at all achievable. And that, to me, is difficult, but a reality. And so, for me, my choice would then fall to not a bell-to-bell, but this during instructional use time. If there were some way to divide it developmentally, I might have a different feeling for bell-to-bell for certain age groups, but that's where I fall.
Thank you, Ms. Sherwood. Ms. Murphy?
I just wanted to make a quick comment about how influenced I was. I think when I first approached this issue, I felt very strongly that, but this is the policy that we should implement. But in the process allowed me to hear the opinions of many different perspectives, many different parents, community members, staff, and students. And I was influenced by that. And I wanted to say thank you for all the different perspectives offered on this issue. It's such an important one, and because I was influenced, it didn't lead me to change my original opinion on what the outcome should be. It did make me think that we needed to revisit this policy in a year, and that's why we decided to add that provision. Technology changes, needs of our students and our community is always changing, and so that's why I'm glad that we included that in the final policy, I shouldn't say final policy, in the draft of the policy.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. I appreciate that. Dr. Noonan, do you mind if we go to you about just your reflections and your thoughts? I mean, you have worn a number of hats. I'm sure you saw the rise of cell phones when you were teaching and school leader. You also have a daughter in the schools that's going to be impacted by this policy. So just any thoughts as we've been discussing this over the last 4 or 5 months?
I think the conversation's been really rich and robust, and I think meaningful in many ways. I know that the team of teachers that were here that had a chance to share their thoughts, knowing that you kind of took a step back, really felt like they were heard. I think, Ms. Rice's comments, I think, are good to listen to. I think she's a great representative. And I also appreciate the fact that you guys led so many town halls and got a chance to hear from parents and from students. It is, the rise of the cell phone is an interesting question. I had one of the first cell phones that was in a bag that was like a brick. And now, now we've got like mini computers in our pockets. I do think what you've heard is probably accurate, and that is that cell phone use at the high school has really dropped a lot. We've been in classrooms, we're there quite often and are not seeing it. And I think our teachers that are enforcing it, and we will double down on that if they aren't enforcing it once this policy is in place, because we want to make sure that all of our teachers are following the policy. I think those folks have really appreciated the fact that they are off and away. The only other thing I would say is this, and it's got to be a joint effort, between us and the parent community. And I think this is where, as a parent of a 15-year-old, if I didn't want her to have access to her phone during the day, I actually can go on my phone and cut off her service. Kids don't have access to the Wi-Fi at the high school anymore without a password. So the only way that they can get out onto the internet or to any of their social media is through their cell signal. And I, as a parent, can cut my student's cell signal off whenever I want and reinstate it whenever I want. And so, one thing I would say, if parents are really inclined to make sure that their kids don't have cell service, or inclined to not have a cell phone at school, exercise that. And then if there is an emergency, you can always turn that cell signal back on. And I just think it needs to be a good partnership between the parents and the schools. And I think there are ways that parents can also help implement, the off and away throughout the day. But I do appreciate all your work on it. And I think wherever you land is wherever you land, and it's your decision ultimately.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan. Vice Chair Tice?
Okay, well, I have had my hand up this whole time, and I want to thank you all, because each time I wasn't called on, you said something I was about to say. So thank you. I will keep this very short, because you've all said all the things I wanted to say. But I did want to thank Ms. Henderson and Ms. Murphy for working with Ms. Minson on getting this policy ready for tonight. I'm really proud of it. I think we worked really hard, and at one point in this process, I think it was Ms. Henderson that said this is definitely a topic where reasonable people can disagree. And I think we saw through all of our conversations, there's a lot of nuance here, a lot of detail. It will be important for us to revisit. I especially agree with Ms. Sherwood's comment that the developmental needs of a 14-year-old are very different than a legal adult 18-year-old. And maybe it's because I've starting to see the world of the upperclassmen, but I really appreciate that perspective, and keeping in mind that this policy governs the whole spectrum of high schoolers, including our legal adults, so who are working their way out into the real world. So thank you, and I am looking forward to voting on this.
Thank you, Ms. Tice. Any other comments, questions from the board? And so Ms. Minson, just from a process, this is the version that we'll be voting on for first reading, and we'll revisit it in a month for second reading. Is there any proposed changes to the language? Yes, Ms. Silverman?
Yes, I would like to move stable group out of into a classroom category if students are supposed to be listening. Otherwise, I don't understand what the purpose of stable group is if you can just sit on your phone during that whole block.
Ms. Tice?
I was just going to reiterate Ms. Henderson's comment that I think that leaving it as is still gives the superintendent and the principal the flexibility to determine what is instructional time based on this wording. I agree with you that I think stable group shouldn't be, phones shouldn't be used during stable group, but I'm comfortable with the way this is written because I think it will come through in the implementation and regulation.
Ms. Murphy?
I also think that leaving the policy as written allows for flexibility in case more classes, names of classes change, more classes that we want to add to that group, classes that the school wants to subtract to that group. I like leaving that flexibility in there for that without having to, it just eliminates the need for us to go back and rewrite to make a ministerial change.
Mr. Anderson? Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Mr. Anderson?
So I appreciate that we want to let them have the flexibility, and we don't want to like name a particular class. It could be that we could say, instructional time includes assemblies and those times in which students are assigned to a teacher who they are supposed to meet with. Because presumably we don't want them on their phones when they're assigned to a teacher and they're meeting with them. But I'll defer to the attorneys to figure out whether that's broad enough for flexibility and also taking care of the goals that we want.
Any thoughts? Ms. Murphy?
Sure. I mean, I understand your point, and going back to stable group, I agree that stable group should be part of the, should be considered instructional time. My concern with your suggestion, Mr. Anderson, is simply that I think that actually broadens and it makes it a little bit too vague to interpret that specifically.
Ms. Henderson?
So my understanding of this policy is that the superintendent and his team are going to have to write a regulation to enforce it, right? So I would hope that sitting here, they understand the will of the board and the desire to have stable group included in the classroom time, and that you've heard that loud and clear. I think leaving it as written allows that flexibility. I would be extremely disappointed to see a regulation that does not account for things like stable group as classroom time.
Okay. Does anybody else have does that sound fair in terms of from Ms. Tice, Ms. Sherwood? And the options are to take out stable group or to lean on the regulation to make sure that that's defined.
Right, I'm going to concur with others, Ms. Murphy, Ms. Henderson, Ms. Tice, who have said the language as is, I think, is appropriate, and I think using the regulation for that purpose makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then that gives us the number. Yeah, we'll go ahead and lean that in terms of the regulation, Dr. Noonan, for Ms. Henderson's point.
We certainly understand the will of the board.
Okay. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go ahead. If there's any other final comments on this, again, to Ms. Murphy's point, I think on behalf of the board, we appreciate, Ms. Rice, all of your coordination with the students and everyone who attended, from parents and community and students and staff. That was a community effort for a discussion. So with that, I think I'm going to need a motion for 8.02, first reading of cell phone policy. Ms. Vice Chair Tice.
I move that the school board approve first reading of policy JTEC, student use of personal electronic devices, as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Tice. Do I have a second? Ms. Sherwood, thank you. All in favor, say yes. Yes. Four.
Do you want me to do a roll call vote?
Let's do a roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson?
No.
Mr. Gould?
Abstain?
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Ms. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Sherwood?
Yes.
Ms. Silverman?
No.
And Ms. Tice?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms.
The
Goodell.
motion passes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much.